Hi, my name is Usman. I'm an architectural photographer at Sonda Creative, and today I'm in Istanbul. The weather is stunning here. I'm really enjoying being here, and I thought I'd make a video about using filters. Now, I've been firmly against using filters for the longest time because I'm a bit of a purist. I don't like putting things in front of my lens. However, I had a word with a couple of Nissi ambassadors and they showed me a bunch of techniques. So I thought I'll keep an open mind and let me at least try them. So they sent me some filters to try. And today what I want to do is I want to compare using filters for your photography versus using Photoshop techniques. So I'm in between a bunch of roads right now. In fact, it is very noisy, lots and lots of traffic. And I'm going to take some pictures and see how both methods compare. Now I've just come a lot closer to the road because I want to show you a different kind of photography that a lot of photographers do, and that's long exposures. Now with long exposures, what the aim of the game is generally to have some movement or have some drama in the sky with the clouds. Now today there aren't any clouds or not many clouds that are visible or moving, so that's not going to work right here. But the other kind of photography is for water. If you want to give some drama or some movement to water, that always works as well. Now for me, there's a lot of traffic over here on this road, but I don't want that traffic on the road, so long exposure could be a way to do it. The other way, if you're going to use Photoshop, is to mean stack your images, where you get a bunch of images and you stack them together, and Photoshop automatically removes the not so common information out of the images. So we're going to compare how those two compare to one another. We're going to compare how those two compare to one another by using an ND filter, neutral density. Now what this does is it stops a certain amount of light coming onto the sensor. So this is 10 stops. So 10 stops of light are going to be stopped from coming onto the sensor. And that's what I'm going to do. So this, you just literally slide it on the front. Like that. And the great thing is, it's got a gasket on the edges, so it's going to prevent any light leaks, or in theory, it's going to prevent light leaks. So filter is on, the polarizing filter is on there too, so I'm just going to check what that looks like by using live view. And right now it's really dark, I can't see anything, so I'm going to have to change the exposure quite dramatically just to be able to see what's going on. And with a polarizer, for this one I'm going to use the polarizing filter and the ND filter, and I'm going to compare that to without the polarizing filter or the ND and just mean stacking the images. Because the other thing I want to look at is sharpness and detail, and that is something which I'm very I find those to be important factors, especially when I'm using this kind of gear. So let's take a quick picture. Says that I'll need about 25, maybe 20 seconds as an exposure to get this right. So let's just take a quick picture. Okay, so I've taken a bunch of pictures and I have to say the results are very, very good. I'm quite impressed with how this filter is able to just take out so much of the traffic. I've actually got clear roads and I'm actually enjoying this. I'm shooting at 25 seconds exposure, f13, so tons of depth of field, but I am getting maybe a little bit of diffraction. The filter's probably causing some issues in terms of sharpness as well, but I don't think that's the point of it. I don't mind a little bit of loss of sharpness, a little bit of loss of detail if I can get the results that I want. And so far, this is doing pretty well. Now, I'm going to take the filter off, take the polarizing filter off as well, and then I'm going to use mean stacking. So I'm going to take a bunch of pictures. So it's going to be at a pretty fast shutter speed, and hopefully merge them together and see what those results look like. Okay, so filter's gone. This is now just a lens. There's no UV filter, as you can see on the front. This is just a lens in the camera. We're going to see if we can replicate those results. Now, the thing that I'm noticing after I've taken a shot is that first thing, the white balance is very different. The image from the Nissi filter is much warmer. I kind of like it though. I actually like the look from the Nissi filter. At the same exact white balance, I'm getting a much colder image when I'm shooting without any filters or any polarizer. Now to get the same exposure, I'm having to shoot at 1/80th of a second. And that's a pretty fast shutter speed. It's not incredibly fast, but it's pretty fast, so it's going to pick up a lot of the cars. So whilst I'm taking these pictures, a bunch of cars are going to be in the shot. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take a heck of a lot of pictures and see if I can merge them together to get a similar result in Photoshop. So here we have the images opened up in Lightroom now. I've got 24 images in total. One of them is a long exposure. The other 23 I'm going to use to create the mean stack. So looking at an individual image from what I'm going to eventually turn into a mean stack, compare that to the long exposure, you can see there's a significant difference. First of all, this section over here, this is from the polarizing filter. You can see how it's darkening the sky, adding a bit of punch to the colors as well. Also, the image taken with the Nissi filter is much warmer than the standard image, and this is with the same exact white balance too. Exposure settings are here, so you've got 25 seconds exposure. This is an 1/80th of a second. So with that long exposure, all the cars are basically getting blurred out, so you can't really see them, and you know, it's doing a pretty good job to get rid of all of that distraction. And in the normal image, all those cars are still there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to select all of these images, take them into Photoshop, and then create a mean stack. And the way to do it is right click, edit in, open layers in Photoshop, which I've already done just to save some time. And here we have all of the images. I've already auto aligned them as well, so it's a good idea to click on edit and select auto align all layers. And now that that's been done, I'm going to click on layer, smart objects, convert to smart objects. And once that's done, you go back to layer, smart objects, go to stack mode, and then select mean. And now we have the stacked image, and you can see a lot of the cars have been taken out using this method. So now I'm going to save the image, bring it back into Lightroom, and we can do a comparison between the long exposure and the mean stack image side by side. Okay, so back in Lightroom now, and I've got both of these images side by side. It is worth mentioning that this image, or to create this stack image, it took me 8 minutes, and that's with a 1080 graphics card, 32 gigs of RAM, and an i7 processor. So even with that, it still took about 8 minutes to create this image. With the long exposure, obviously it didn't take, well, any time. I mean, whatever the time it took for me to import it into Lightroom, that's all the time I spent on it. None of these images have had any adjustments to them, and you can see that normally if you do an adjustment in the bottom corner, you see like a little mark, but none of these images have any adjustments to them. Sharpening is whatever Lightroom applies naturally. So let's have a look at what this looks like and compare the two. So first thing, obviously colors are obviously going to still be different, and the mean stacking method has done an okay job getting rid of all of those cars. But if we zoom in over here, do you see all of this? It is nowhere near as smooth and as natural looking as the long exposure look. It's just, this is not a great method for getting rid of cars. Long exposure, fantastic method. Mean stacking looks pretty horrible. I would not want to print this. I would not want to, you know, blow it up big. This is not a great effect. So this is not the first time I'm looking at this. Obviously, personally, I did a comparison myself, so it's not a surprise to me. But first time it was, because I thought it was going to be a pretty good effect. I thought it was going to look pretty good, but it doesn't. Long exposure is a much better option if you want to get rid of traffic and if you want to get rid of distractions in your image. Second thing, sharpness. Now let's go 2-to-1 on this. This is coming as the biggest surprise to me. I can't tell them apart when it comes to sharpness. Contrast wise, yes, to some extent, but in terms of sharpness and detail, I can't tell them apart. Obviously, this image is much cleaner. You can see a little bit of noise in this image over here and some noise in the shadows, but that's not anything to do with the filters. That's everything to do with the actual camera. And when you mean stack, a lot of that noise is taken out. So this is going to be an extremely clean image when it comes to the shadows and the noise. But that aside,
in terms of sharpness, I really can't tell them apart. I'm very surprised, very impressed with how the Nisi filters are performing when it comes to detail. I mean, a lot of this glare has been taken out because of the polarizer, but it's incredible how well the Nisi filter is able to retain detail and sharpness. I'm very surprised. When it comes to chromatic aberrations, both of them do have some chromatic aberration. This was in harsh sunlight, so you could see there, you can see that, you know, there's some fringing on the actual trees. The 24 tilt shift is a fantastic lens, and it's not known for getting a lot of fringing. So this is putting you into an extreme circumstance, and you are going to see some fringing, but it's not any worse or any better to my eye with the filter. Again, I need to stress the fact that I'm using two pieces of glass in front of the 24 tilt shift here. I'm using a polarizing filter and the 10-stop ND, and still the detail that I'm retaining is incredible.
Okay, so for the second location, I'm at a place called Ortake Shame, and over here there's a body of water in front of the building, and there's a big suspension bridge in the back, which I really like. So what I wanted to do is, again, long expose the shot, try and get the water smoothed out. I'm using a polarizing filter, and that polarizer is just going to cut out some of the reflections, maybe some of the glare that's hitting the water. I just don't want that coming back onto the lens. So I'm going to take a couple of shots using the long exposure techniques. I'm using a 45 tilt shift, so I might shift the lens up and create a bit of a panorama. But other than that, the main thing, or the main goal about this, is to try and get the reflections down and also get that long exposed look. I'll also compare that to image stacking. Polarizing filter, I'm not going to be able to replicate that in Photoshop. I can't. Maybe someone out there can, but personally, I don't think that's. I think that's too difficult for me to do. But the long exposure look, I think, is possible with image stacking, and I'll compare the two and show you what they look like. So first, let's just take a quick shot. I've got the 10-stop filter on, shooting at about 15 seconds at the moment. So a bunch of boats are in the shot at the moment. I've been waiting for them to go, but I don't have a lot of time, so I think I'm just going to have to take the shot.
So I'm back in my office now, obviously back in England. I'm sorry for the jump there. I was actually on assignment in Istanbul, so I didn't get a chance to film everything I wanted to. But since I've been back here, I did take a couple of shots in Leeds, and I've got a couple of images opened up in Lightroom behind me. So we're going to do another quick comparison, and then I'm going to give you my conclusions based on some of the testing that I've done. So here we have 3 images opened up in Lightroom. And this is the first one. This is without any filters. This is just a straight shot. And this is what you'd kind of expect when it comes to the white balance I used, the color profile, and also how it's been shot. So in terms of detail, obviously it's going to be a very sharp image because you haven't got anything obstructing the lens. And it looks pretty good. You've got a lot of detail, a lot of clarity in this particular image. Now, go on to the second image. This is what the image looks like with mean stacking, and the water, it's obviously a lot smoother, but again, it's just got this slight rough look to it, and the reflections are very muddy. It doesn't look that pleasing overall. I think in a pinch this could work, and the clouds look a lot better. It's obviously much cleaner. You haven't got that much noise in comparison, but still, I'm not a fan of how this method looks when you when you're trying to long expose water, and I'll show you why. So this is the final image, and this is with a 30-second exposure at f5.6, and this is what reflections look like when you're using when you're actually doing long exposures with an ND filter. The reflections look much better. There's a lot more definition. It doesn't look as milky or muddy, and I'm just a fan of the way that it looks. Again, back and forth. I'll just put them side by side as well so you can see them. And you can see how much of a difference it makes. If I zoom in, sorry, that's not where I was zoomed in. There you go. You can see that the reflections look far more pleasing. There's more detail in the water in terms of the reflections. And this is the kind of look that we're aiming for, but this is what you end up with when you're mean stacking. Zooming in to look at some of the sharpness of the exposure is a little bit different. If I'm just looking at the histogram, obviously this is a tad brighter than this one. So I think that's what's making this section pop a little bit more than this. But if I move over to, let's say, this section over here, especially in the lines in the building, you can see the difference in sharpness is minimal. I mean, I can't tell them apart when it comes to that difference at all. It's incredible how sharp the ND filters are. The loss of detail, again, look at the lettering over here and look at the lettering over here. There's literally no difference in sharpness. It's amazing. I mean, I had some preconceived notions going into this comparison, but they've, well and truly been shattered. Objectively speaking, this image looks far more pleasing to me. It has a lot more character, has a lot more life to it. So there you have it. That's how Photoshop techniques like mean stacking compare to using filters, and effectively, filters win. There's just no way that you can get that really smooth, natural looking long exposure image with mean stacking than you can with using filters. Filters just look a ton better. Images with the mean stacking technique just look really, really rough. The cars in Istanbul, they just look really rough, and the water didn't have that definition, the reflections didn't look as good, it just looked really, really bad. And also the difference in terms of sharpness, this is the thing that really, really got my attention, and it's the fact that the Nissi filters are incredible. The sharpness, the detail, the way that it renders everything is just amazing. There's literally no difference in detail and sharpness performance. And again, you have to remember, I had two pieces of glass in front of the lens, a polarizing filter and a 10-stop ND filter, and even with that, and I'm gonna again make the images available to you so you can see them as well, but there's literally no difference that I can see when it comes to the detail. Now, I'm not sponsored by Nissi in any way, shape or form. I don't know anyone at the actual company personally. This is not a sponsored video. The reason I got these filters is because my friend Imran is an ambassador for Nissi, and he introduced me to someone called Mark Andreas Jones, and he sent me these filters, and I'm very, very pleased to have done this comparison, because prior to this, I honestly did think that filters were going to degrade the quality of the images significantly, and mean stacking was going to be a much better option. And the results that I'm showing you are only specific to Nissi filters. Other filters that you can buy and use may vary in terms of performance. There's another thing that I want to mention as well. If you're doing anything more complex than just doing a long exposure, let's say you're doing let's say you want to do a HDR or bracketing, or if you want to create a panorama like I did in Istanbul with the place called Ortaköy Shami, I think probably pronouncing that wrong, but if you're going to do those kind of images, then it's just completely impractical to do mean stacking, because then you have to take about 15 or 20 images per section, and that is just not practical. If you're using the filters, it's much easier. You just take one shot for each section as you would normally. I know that there's a cost involved with using filters. I know that on average you're going to looking at spending about $500 to maybe $600 for a good effective package. But there's another thing that you need to consider, and that's not using filters and mean stacking and taking loads and loads of images, especially if you're using cameras like the Canon 5DSR with the massive 50 megapixel files. It's gonna cost you money anyway. It's just gonna be a longer term cost and a continuous regular cost, because it's costing you time, a significant amount of time in all fairness. It's taking me between 8 and 12 minutes on a relatively powerful desktop to create one stacked image. So that time adds up, and that time is costing you a lot. And the other thing is, it's costing you money in terms of storage. It might not seem like it's a lot, but it does add up. Every time you're taking these images, and every time you need to take those extra 15 or 20 images, it's costing you money. You need to replace your hard drive sooner or back up more often. And this is something that you need to take into consideration. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are in terms of using filters. Have you used filters before? Is this something that you would consider, especially now that these results are coming out with the newer filters from Nissi? If you haven't used them ever before, is this something that has surprised you? Did you think the way that I did and thought and consider mean stacking as a much better option? Please let me know in the comments. If you have any suggestions, again, get in touch. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe to my channel. I'm really thankful for you guys watching my videos. I really do appreciate it. And share this video if you liked it. And I'll see you guys in the next one.
Thank you.